So some years ago, somebody told me, I don't know if this is true, but I don't have a reason to suspect the person was lying, that that somebody did a scientific study and found out that people who smiled more were happier, and that there's something to do with the muscles around your mouth, maybe, that affect your brain or whatever, and it makes you happier. So I don't see any harm in trying that out and seeing if it works. Yeah? And I think we can do that without spending a lot of money in scientific research. I think we can try and see through our own experience. Now, if we develop the habit of smiling at others rather than the habit of just like this, or the habit of this. But if we really develop the habit of looking at people and smiling and see how that affects our own internal experience. Yeah. So we were talking about, don't believe everything you think, and clearly I'm not going to get through the whole book this time. So we're going to continue next year. So this is your homework assignment between this year and next year, is to practice smiling and see what happens. So, okay? Yeah, just try it and see from your own experience. And especially, on the days when you feel like, try smiling. Just push yourself a little bit, nudge yourself a little bit. Because when we feel like, I'm in a bad mood or I'm tired, then we usually just like, well, I can't do anything. And then we go into our kind of feel sorry for myself mode. I'm just so exhausted. And, there's certain times I think in our life where it's good to kind of nudge ourselves and like, okay, I might be tired, but it's not going to make me that more tired if I smile. It's not like running a half a mile or something. Although I must say that my sister-in-law told me when she feels tired, she goes out jogging. And she says it renews her energy. So, okay, maybe smiling is that little bit of exercise you need. But, try it and see. Okay? Okay, so we'll continue on. Trying to find out who we are. Or actually in Buddhism, I always tell people we're usually trying to find out who we aren't. Yeah, because just as His Holiness said in the book, we have been projecting a mode of existence onto phenomena and onto persons that they don't have. And what we're trying to see now is how things really exist without the false mode of existence that we have projected onto them and then grasped as being true. Okay, so we're deconstructing here. And, so much in our lives, I think in Buddhist practice, we're trying to get rid of wrong conceptions, because we are just chock-a-block full of them, and all these wrong conceptions produce so many problems, like we were talking about yesterday. When we develop some wrong interpretation of what somebody says, then we take off and run with it and develop this whole hallucination story of how this person is out to get us, or we're a catastrophe, or who knows what our story is. There's a few kind of standard templates. Yeah, but there's some variation. But to really start asking ourselves, am I have this self-image? Am I this? Yeah. So yesterday when we were saying, am I my body? Yeah. Now we have an image of what our body is, and we may develop a whole lot of self-image dependent on this body. I'm old. therefore, no one's going to listen to me, or they should listen to me more, or I'm not as, attractive as I used to be. Where's the Viagra? And, whatever it is, I got to get, put the Botox in here and, get rid of these wrinkles. And, we develop all sorts of notions about ourselves just based on the age of the body. Don't we? Yeah. Are we those notions of ourselves? Yeah. Is that who we are? Is that our identity? Yeah. We're, so often in our society, we're led to believe that it is. And that if you look a certain way, then people should treat you in a certain way, and you have a certain status or whatever. But none of that is true, is it? I mean, it's all kind of societally conjectured, and we could just as easily make the societal rules different. Mm-hmm. And so if we look at so many of these notions we have about ourselves based on our body, so many of them are really false. And this goes especially, with age, I think is one way that we really develop strong notions about our body, and also gender too. I'm a woman, therefore blah, 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 blah. I'm a man, therefore blah, 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 blah. And we develop these images, and we limit ourselves by these images. Now, thinking that we are them, or if we aren't, we should be. If I were only normal, I should be. Come on, So, these grasping onto images and thinking that concoctions are our identity limits us and really causes us a great deal of distress. And if you can't think of your having those problems now, remember when you were a teenager. Okay, remember when you were a teenager and you had all these images about how you should look? Yeah. Did any of you look the way you thought you should look when you were a teenager? I didn't look the way I thought I should look. Yeah. I thought I should have long, straight, blonde hair. I had short, brown, curly hair. Yeah. And it caused me so much grief. And this was before the days when, you were allowed to dye your hair when you were 15. And to see, how much trouble it was in my mind that I didn't look the way I thought I was supposed to look. And then seeing how we go through life and we're presented with images that we buy into, thinking that we should look like them, and none of us do. Yeah, even the people whose pictures are in the magazines don't look like themselves because all those pictures have been computer altered. Do you think anybody has the kind of complexion that you see on a close-up of a model in a magazine? Come on. Yeah. So, we develop these images and then grasp on, this is who I am, and I should be like this, but I'm not like that, so therefore something's wrong with me. Therefore I'm poor quality. And then we develop this image of being poor quality, and of course when we think we're poor quality, then we don't even try to do things, because we've already told ourselves that we're incapable of doing it. Okay? And so this becomes a big problem for us in our regular life, but also in our spiritual life. You hear that you can become a Buddha and you go, what are they talking about? Not me. If they really knew what I was thinking inside, they definitely wouldn't say I could become a Buddha. In fact, I hope these Buddhas don't really have clairvoyant powers. I don't want anybody to know what's going on inside of me. It's impossible for anybody to know what's going on in my mind and accept me and love me for what I am. Impossible. Okay, so these kind of notions, do you see how limiting they are? Now, and how we've adopted them in some form or another when we were kids, and then of course elaborated on them as we've gone through life. And thereby, built ourselves. I always tease people in the Abbey that we dig ourselves into a hole, and then we decorate our hole. Yeah? And that's exactly what we do. We develop these images. That's our hole. We dig ourselves into it. And then we decorate it, with everything that's going to reinforce that very negative, limiting self-image, of somebody who we are not. Okay, so this whole idea of seeing ourselves as we really are involves, taking out and shredding a lot of these old images. And many times we don't even know we have them. They've been with us so long that we don't even know we have them. And we think they're reality. And if somebody challenges our image of who we think we are, we get really upset. And sometimes, if we have a certain puffed up image of who we are and somebody challenges it, we get upset. But also, if we have a negative image of who we are, and somebody comes along and says, "I don't believe that, I think you're much better than that," then we get really nervous and we get kind of squeamish, and we think the other person must be totally nuts. How could, somebody who really likes me or somebody who loves me must be out of their mind deluded, because I'm just not lovable. My goodness. Yeah, talk about being opinionated. We sure are, aren't we? So to really, see some of these things and learn to laugh at them and then release them. Because we are not them, they are not us. Okay? Then you're going to go, then what am I? Give me something to grab onto, please. And this is the whole thing in Buddhism, is that there is nothing to grab onto. We're created phenomena, created by our causes and conditions. There's no solid, concrete entity here. So created by causes and conditions, we're in constant flux. We're changing from one moment to the next. There's no static thing that we can say, "Oh, this is me forever and ever." And yet, that makes us really nervous, because even if we have a negative self-image, if we grasp onto it, then we know who we are. Yeah. Whereas if we release that, it's like, I'm floating in space, man. This is, I can't relax and just kind of zoom like the birds. I'm like tense. But, if we're floating, why not enjoy it? Yeah? We're being created. Every moment, we're going out of existence every moment. Things are changing every moment. Let's sit back and enjoy it instead of trying to make what is transient into something concrete, which is impossible. Not to mention painful. Okay. So now His Holiness says, next we become, so he's talking about first us having false appearances, things appearing to us in a way that they don't exist. And then he says, next we become committed to the seeming truth of the concreteness of objects, thinking if this is not true, what could possibly be true? Yeah. As we do so, our ignorant misapprehension gets stronger. For instance, when we first encounter someone or something nice, we briefly take notice of the object of our attention, merely recognizing its presence. The mind at this point is pretty much neutral. But when circumstances cause us to pay more attention to the object, it appears to be attractive in a way that is integral to the object. It has beauty or desirability from its own side. When the mind adheres to the object in this way, thinking that it exists as it appears, desire for the object arises, and hatred for what interferes with getting it can set in. Okay? So we can notice that. Like, I think looking for a new car is a good example. When you're not especially looking for a new car, you notice all these cars, and you might see different features of different cars that you think are nice, but you don't pay a lot of attention to them. Then, when the mind comes, oh, I want to get a new car, then you start really looking at everything. And then this car that, has been in a lot that you've driven by every day for the last 6 months, now you look at that car and, oh, wow, look at that. It's a really nice shade of silver, and it has this feature, and it has that feature, and it's really desirable. I think I want it. It's going to make me happy, and it fits in very well with the image that I'm going to be creating, because I have to drive a certain kind of car to be a certain kind of person. And, I better get this car immediately before somebody else jumps and gets it. It's been sitting there for 6 months. But do you see how it works? All of a sudden. And then you go and it's like, oh, this car is so wonderful, but it has a dent. I didn't see the dent. Oh, that's terrible. I can't get this precious new car. It has a dent in it. Somebody must have knocked it since I've driven by it the last 100 times. Yeah? Okay? So just, because we see attraction from its own side, then we really cling to it, and we don't want anything else to get in the way of our getting what we want. Because we projected so much goodness onto it. It's the same with looking for a job, Oh, this job, I really want this job. This is the exact kind of job I want. It's going to make me happy, and, and it pays well, and it corresponds to my image, and my family's going to be proud of me, and da-da-da-da-da. I really need this job. Yeah. And then you put all this energy into it, and then if you don't get it, wow, it's crash. And if you do get it, then you get all the problems that come along with it. Yeah? So what I'm saying is, and what we need to do is change our mind. Certainly you need to work. Yeah? But realize that instead of this job is going to fulfill my needs and make me look good, think I'm going there to offer service to the people I work with. I'm going there to produce something that's of use to society and make people benefit from what I'm doing. Yeah, so change your motivation completely. Then, going to work has a totally different meaning in your life. Okay. Anyway, this is all happening because we're reifying objects, okay? When our own self is involved, we emphasize that connection. Now it is my body, my stuff, my friends, or my car. We exaggerate the object's attractiveness, obscuring its faults and disadvantages, and become attached to it as helpful in acquiring pleasure, whereby we are forcibly led into attachment as if by a ring in our nose. The Tibetans have this a saying, don't be like a donkey who is led about with a ring in their nose. You know, if you've ever been to Dharamsala, you see all these donkeys. My heart goes out to these donkeys. They have these huge bags of stone or sand on their back, really, really heavy. And, you know, their owners have a ring through their nose and just pull them along and beat them. And so the Tibetans always have the saying, you know, don't let someone or something lead you around like a donkey with its, you know, a ring through its nose. But what His Holiness is saying here is when we're under the influence of attachment or anger, our own disturbing emotion, our own mental affliction, is leading us around as if we had a ring in our nose and it's pulling us. You know, attachment says, go here, do this, do that. Anger and upset, so go here, say this, do that. Yeah, and we aren't free. We're under the power of our afflicted mind. And that's the loss of freedom. Okay, which is much worse than, I think, than the kind of freedom that we like having in our modern society. If we lose our external freedom, if our mind is free, we can still be happy. But even if we have our external freedom, if our mind is enslaved by ignorance, anger, attachment, then very difficult to really be happy. Okay, so as soon as we label something mine and have that ring in our nose of the desire for it, we lose our freedom. We might also exaggerate the object's unattractiveness, making something minor into a big defect, ignoring its better qualities. And now we view the object as interfering with our pleasure, being led into hatred, again as if by a ring in our nose. Okay, this is what I call the famous peanut butter argument. Okay? And I'm sure people will recognize what I'm talking about. Okay, so you've been married for X number of years, right? And you like crunchy peanut butter, and you and your spouse take turns going to the grocery store to buy stuff. Yeah, kind of normal, or you know, or maybe your spouse is the one who goes to the store buying stuff. And, you know, you've run out of the crunchy peanut butter, and you're assuming that your spouse is going to get it, and you come down to breakfast and all ready to make yourself your peanut butter sandwich, and there's no crunchy peanut butter. In fact, either there's no peanut butter at all, or it's creamy peanut butter. You're not sure which is worse, actually. Because if they don't have any peanut butter, maybe they forgot. But if they've got creamy peanut butter, maybe something else is going on. So you say, dear, when is we need some crunchy peanut butter. I thought you were going to get it. And your spouse says, well, I forgot. And then you go, what do you mean you forgot? You always go shopping on Thursdays. Today's Friday. You just went shopping. How come you didn't get it? Well, I didn't have my list with me, or whatever it is. Well, but wait a minute. You know that we've been out of crunchy peanut butter, and you know that I like crunchy peanut butter. This has been obvious for the last week. Why didn't you get the crunchy peanut butter? Oh, well, you know, this is always happening in our marriage. You know, I want something, I need something, you know about it, and then you don't do it. There's some passive-aggressive behavior going on here. You know, and I've been falling prey to this passive-aggressive behavior for the last 15 years. This has permeated our relationship. I don't care how many jars of crunchy peanut butter you've got me. Now I'm seeing the reality. You don't really care about me. I want a divorce. Yeah. And it's all over the crunchy peanut butter, isn't it? I wonder how many marriages have ended because of this. But you get what I mean. It's, you know, it's some small, insignificant thing. I mean, 1 year from now, are you going to really care whether or not you had crunchy peanut butter this morning for breakfast? Yeah, Tanya will care, but you know, the rest of us aren't. But, you know, we take one small thing, and because it pertains to us, we get really worked up about it, and we give it all sorts of meaning that it doesn't have. Yeah, and we do our, you know, our amateur psychodiagnosis. You know, you're suffering from, what was it, passive-aggressive disorder, you know? And then we, you know, we just go bananas with this kind of thing. So it's, you know, it's all our mind. It's all our mind's creation. Totally. Yeah. And we get really worked up. Yeah. Even if the object does not seem to be either agreeable or disagreeable, but just an ordinary thing in the middle, ignorance continues to prevail, although in this case it does not generate desire or hatred. As the Indian scholar yogi Nagarjuna said in his 60 stanzas of reasoning, how could great poisonous afflictive emotions not arise in those whose minds are based on inherent existence? Even when an object is ordinary, their minds are grasped by the snake of destructive emotions. So what he's saying here is that as long as our mind is under the influence of this ignorance that grasps at inherent existence, then it's very natural that, you know, resentment and anger and greed and attachment and all these other things just arise. Yeah. And then His Holiness continues, cruder conceptions of I and mind evoke grosser destructive emotions, such as arrogance and belligerence, making trouble for yourself, your community, and even your nation. These misconceptions need to be identified by watching your own mind. So again, we can see this kind of thing in our own life, you know, how things function. And we can watch how, when our mind goes crazy under the influence of an afflictive emotion, we're miserable and we create misery around us. It's really obvious. Yeah, but it's very hard to realize while it's going on because we're so convinced that what we see exists in the way we perceive it and that our perception is true. And this is the way things really are, definitely. Okay. As the Indian thinker and yogi Dharmakirti says in his exposition of Buddhist thinking, in one who exaggerates self, there is always adherence to I. Through that adherence, there is attachment to pleasure. Through attachment, disadvantages are obscured, and advantages are seen, whereby there is strong attachment. That's what's called falling in love. Right? You know, when you first meet somebody, oh, they're kind of okay. You know, then you get to know, oh, they're really good. Then you get to know them more. they don't have any faults at all. Wow, finally. Then you get to know them some more. Oh, they have faults. Okay. And objects that are mine are taken up as means of achieving pleasure. Hence, as long as there is attraction to self, so long do you revolve in cyclic existence. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about this word my or mine. Okay, I think this is one of the words they say that kids learn when they're having the terrible twos. That's their chief vocabulary word. Mine. Mine. This is mine. Okay. So it's, it's awful when you're with a kid who's in the midst of the terrible twos. And then they grow up and they just, camouflage it a little bit, but, it's still there. But it's quite interesting to watch how our mind changes as soon as we label something mine. Yeah. So I always have to tell my airplane story regarding this one. When I was flying from Knoxville to back to Seattle or something. I had just been in Knoxville teaching. I don't know if you were at that teaching or not. I was teaching the 5 forces. Were you there? Yeah. And it was a wonderful teaching all about generating bodhicitta in your life and at the time of death. And so I got on this flight, and it was one of these packed flights, and I had deliberately booked an aisle seat. Yeah, because it was a long flight and I didn't want to be squished between 2 people. Well, when I got to my seat, somebody was in it. And I said, "Excuse me, you're in my seat." And the person looked up and said, "Oh, I was just wondering if I could sit here, because I have the middle seat." And so, after teaching this whole course about love and compassion, I said, "No." I said, "I have a long flight. I want to sit in the aisle seat." So she reluctantly moved over. And then, of course, I felt guilty. And so I offered, "Well, okay, I'll sit here for part of the flight, and then I'll switch seats with you, and you could sit here for part of the flight." But she said no, she wouldn't do that. So I sat in this seat, my seat, because it was my seat. I had meticulously booked it in advance with full knowledge that I wanted an aisle seat. It was my seat, and even I had the ticket to prove it, and even the flight attendant and everybody on the plane would agree it was my seat. So I had a lot of attachment to this seat, Of course, I felt guilty the whole ride home and couldn't enjoy it. But then it was amazing. As soon as the plane landed in Seattle, I got up, I left, and when I looked back, I couldn't even tell which one was my seat anymore. And I realized that, for 2 or 3 hours, whatever it is, this sense of my was so strong. I mean, I was going to do anything to have that seat. And then as soon as one small condition changed, which is the plane landed, I gave up the label mine, and my whole relationship with that seat changed. And everybody in the world could have sat in it. And I'm sure many people have sat in my seat afterwards as the plane's gone different places, And it really made me see the power of the word my or mine, And how a small change in condition, then you release that word, and then your mind is free. Okay. Okay? Whereas from the side of the seat, nothing has changed. It's the same seat, isn't it? You know, whether I label it mine or whether I don't label it mine, it's the same uncomfortable delta seat. Yeah? But the power of the mind changes it. Okay? So we can see this in many areas of our life. As soon as we label something mine, so many ideas about it come up. And we really start get this feeling of strong possessiveness. We get upset when something that is mine is challenged. Our whole identity is kind of sunk into something. And yet, it's only by the power of a label. There's nothing in an object, or there's nothing in another person that we can open up and say, this is mine about them. Okay? So especially about kids, the idea of my child is a really powerful one. My child. Then all of a sudden your child has a ton of expectations on him or her that other people's kids don't. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? My child has to have everything I didn't have, whether they want it or not. My child has to be everything I wasn't able to be, whether they want to be that or not. My child has to, excel in these areas. My child has to, do this and that. I talked to one friend of mine who just had a new baby, and he said when he was holding the baby that he already had her whole college education planned out. Yeah. She hadn't even learned to roll over yet. Yeah. And then, yet here there was so much. Whereas in somebody else's baby, you wouldn't have put all those expectations, would you? Yeah? So we see as soon as we label someone or something mine, the attachment chips in, and the clinging, the possessiveness come in, and it can really become rather limiting. For us as well as for the other person. Yeah. That doesn't mean that when you look at your child, you don't use the conventional pronoun and say, that's my child. If you go to the school to pick your child up and somebody says, whose child is this? You should say, my child. You don't say, oh, it's somebody else's child, or I don't know whose child it is, or whatever. You still use the conventional pronoun, it's my child. Yeah. But to be able to use that pronoun without all this other stuff put on top of it. Yeah. Because you know what happens when your child becomes a teenager. Yeah. Of course, nowadays I'm finding teens don't act like we did when we were teens. Us dinosaurs.
You don't have video games.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have video games. Now you plug your kid into a video game and, they don't cause you headaches anymore. Okay. But nowadays too, I mean, when I was young, we were all dying to get out of the house as quick as we could. And now kids do not get out of the house, And it's kind of comfy staying with your parents. They do the laundry, they cook and clean, they do all this stuff for you. Yeah. I mean, I moved out of the house, but I still brought my laundry home. But, that's how they knew I loved them. Yeah. But it's interesting how, this term I and mine, influences how we think of people and how we live our lives so much. Yeah, and you can see just by our reaction to how we read things in the news. If something happens to somebody who we're in some way identified with, maybe we're the same racial group or the same gender or the same sexual orientation or the same ethnicity or the same nationality or the same socioeconomic class or the same profession or what it is. But if there's something that happens to somebody that is like us in some way, we take much greater interest in it than if it's somebody we don't know that's unrelated. Where, people die of starvation in a drought in Africa is much less important to us than people who die in starvation in one of the U.S., states. And that's much less important to us than if a member of our family doesn't have enough to eat. And yet, in all three cases, it's the case of some sentient being not having enough food. But the word my and the self-identity, causes the bias to be very, very strong. Whereby with some people, their situation seems really important. And with other people, it's like, doesn't matter. I'm on compassion fatigue. I can't handle it. Yeah, but it's all the same, really. It's all the same, isn't it? It is crucial to identify and recognize different thought processes. Some thoughts merely make us aware of an object, such as seeing a watch as a watch without any afflictive emotions like attachment. Other thoughts determine correctly that an object is good or bad, but still they do not introduce any afflictive emotions. These thoughts just recognize good and bad as bad. So that would be, the first example is I see the clock as a clock. No big deal. Second one is, this clock is useful for telling time. Yeah, it's very helpful for telling time. Again, no big deal. It has that quality. I see it as having that quality. It's a good quality, but it's not a big deal. However, when the idea that objects inherently exist takes hold, fundamental ignorance has been introduced. As the misconception of inherent existence becomes stronger, attachment or hatred become involved. So I'm giving a talk and I need to stop talking at a certain time or else people get really upset, so I need this clock. Yeah, and this is my clock. Yeah, and so at that time, I'm seeing the clock as inherently existent. There's an inherently existent my that is projected onto it. Yeah, there's an inherently existent scenario of, I talk too long and then people get mad at me, and then my reputation suffers, being projected on, and it's all because of grasping at inherent existence. And then this clock ceases to be just a clock that's useful for telling time, and it's something I have to have. Like my airplane seat. Yeah, it's not just an airplane seat. I have to have this one. It's a jammed flight. There's no other seat. Yeah. Okay, the turning point from mere awareness to misconception comes when ignorance exaggerates the status of goodness or badness of the object, so that it comes to be seen as inherently good or bad, inherently attractive or unattractive, inherently beautiful or ugly. Ignorantly misjudging this false appearance to be fact opens the way for attachment, hatred, and myriad other counterproductive emotions. These destructive emotions, in turn, lead to actions based on attachment and hatred. These actions establish karmic predispositions in the mind that drive the process of cyclic existence from life to life. Okay? So there he's laying out the whole thing. From you have ignorance, from that comes afflictive emotions like attachment and hatred. Those motivate us to do actions, which are usually, not such nice actions because they're motivated by this kind of selfish attachment or anger. The actions we do leave energy traces, predispositions in our mind, and then these predispositions are what ripen and determine who we're reborn as, where we're reborn as, the kind of habitual tendencies we have, what happens to us in our life, and so on. Okay? And so we see here that we're enslaved by our own ignorance. Because once that ignorance gets activated, then the afflictions, then the actions, then the unpleasant results. And then, of course, when we're having unpleasant results, if we're a Dharma practitioner, we say, oh good, now my negative karma is ripening. Yeah, and I'm learning about my own mind, how my own mind reacts, and I see that if I don't like experiencing this kind of thing, I have to stop the mental afflictions that cause the actions that bring these experiences. And so we learn something from it. But if you don't have that ability to apply the Dharma perspective to it, then when we meet unpleasant things, we wail, why me? This is unfair. Yeah? And then we either get angry or we sink into self-pity. And then with anger we create, and self-pity we just create, we have more ignorance, we have more afflictions, create more, destructive actions, and the whole cycle continues. Okay? So this is why it's important to notice how the ignorance works. Then the next section is called the root of cyclic existence. The process I just described is how we are ruined by our own ignorance and fixed to this round of suffering in life after life. That we call cyclic existence. So that's what cyclic existence is. We're stuck in this circle lifetime after lifetime. Some levels of mind which we normally identify as correct are actually exaggerations of the status of persons and things that create trouble for ourselves and others. Okay, so we project we have perceptions that we normally think are correct, but in actual fact, the ignorance is operating and the afflictions are operating. And when we have a fight with somebody, that's a perfect example of it. Yeah, every time we have a fight with somebody, we are under the influence of destructive emotions. And destructive emotions do not see reality correctly. But when we're having a quarrel with somebody, or when our feelings are hurt, do we think I'm misperceiving the situations? No, we think I'm right. So here's the situation that's brought about by ignorance, that we don't even, let alone realizing the ignorance, we don't even realize the emotion we're feeling, or even if we realize that we're angry and upset, we don't see it as an emotion that is not perceiving the situation correctly. We see it as a correct emotion, as a beneficial emotion, because my anger is going to defend me. If I'm not angry, then somebody's going to take advantage of me. As if we can't say no through wisdom. We have to be angry to say no. Isn't that strange? Why can't wisdom and compassion be motivations for saying no? Why do we have to be angry to say no? It doesn't make any sense. Okay? Okay. Ignorance keeps us from seeing the truth, the fact that people and other phenomena are subject to the laws of cause and effect, but do not have essential being that is independent in and of themselves. Okay, so things are subject to cause and effect. They rise in dependence upon other factors. They cease in dependence upon the very causes that brought them into existence. But we don't see that. Instead, we think they have their own essence that is independent of other things, that they exist under their own power, from their own side. You need to identify this process as well as you can, gradually developing greater and greater understanding of the sequence of events, beginning with dispassionate observation and culminating in counterproductive emotions and actions. Without ignorance, counterproductive emotions are impossible. They cannot occur. Ignorance is their support. That is why Nagarjuna's student, the Indian scholar yogi Aryadeva, says, just as the capacity to feel is present throughout the body, ignorance dwells in all afflictive emotions. Therefore, all afflictive emotions are overcome through overcoming ignorance. And then there's a meditative reflection, which I'll read here, and then maybe you can do the next session. So the first point says, does the attractiveness of an object seem to be integral to it or inherent in it? Does the attractiveness of an object obscure its faults and disadvantages? Does exaggeration of the pleasantness of certain objects lead to attachment? These are all things in the meditation to make examples of in your life. Does exaggeration of the unpleasantness of certain objects lead to hatred? Okay, and then notice how you first perceive an object. Then notice if the object is good or bad. Then conclude that the object has its own independent basis for existing. Then conclude that the object's goodness or badness exists inherently in the object. Then generate attachment or hatred according to your previous judgment. Okay? So this is the process to, in your meditation, to sit and make many examples of in your daily life. Just recall things. No? And then, when you're living your daily life, watch how this operates. And sometimes we don't catch it until, there was, actually there's another step after this one. Then we act based on our attachment and hatred. Sometimes we don't recognize it until that step. Oh, I just said something really mean to somebody. And then, oh, why did I do that? Oh, there was anger in my mind. Why was there that? Because I thought that that person's badness was inherent in them. Why was there that? Because I thought they they existed independent of other factors. Why that? Because before I just noticed that, there was this quality. And before that, I just perceived the object. Okay, so you trace the thing from beginning to end, and then from end back to beginning, watching the whole sequence. Yeah? And then in our life, to practice noticing this, while it's happening, and hopefully by noticing it while it's happening, stopping it. Yeah? Because after we've said the really mean thing, then it's really difficult, isn't it? Yeah. The words are already out, the person's already heard them, we already feel bad for what we did. So, then we have a lot of rectifying and apologizing and so forth to do. Whereas if we can stop, and purification as well of the negative karma. Whereas if we can stop it earlier on in the sequence, we identify the object and we see its functions, good or bad. That's it. Stop there. Yeah? And not go on to all the other stuff. Okay, we're on chapter 3. Which is, yeah, sure.
When you, in this, on page 38, number 5, would you
say that next to the last point of those, that's the point where they use the words you assent to it?
I think the point before that, we conclude the object has its own independent basis for existing. That's the point where we assent to the appearance. And then when we think that its goodness or badness are inherent in it, that's when we're really starting to elaborate even more. And that's assenting to the appearance too, but it's stronger and more elaboration. Okay, yeah. Uh-huh.
You know when you said like, why is it, because my mind wandered, and then you said, why do we have to be angry to say no?
Yeah.
I suffer from that a lot. So I was wondering, how does it fit in it? Why do we have to be angry?
Yeah, okay, thank you for asking that. Yeah, because a lot of times if we look at our experience, we know something isn't good to do. Yeah, or we know something isn't wise, or we know that we just don't want to be involved in something. Yeah, or we know in larger society that something is unjust or unfair, or that somebody's getting harmed. But we kind of, don't intercede unless we feel angry. Many people, even people, conflict mediators and so forth, feel that anger has a good quality because it lets you know something is wrong. And that's what I'm questioning. Do we have to be angry to know that something is wrong? Do we have to be angry to say, no, I don't want to get involved with something that we know is wrong? Because sometimes we don't feel unless we have this revved upness and adrenaline that anger gives us. We feel like somehow I don't really have the strength to do it. Or maybe my perception isn't correct. There's a lot of self-doubt. So we'll let things go on for a while. Yeah. But then once we get angry, basta finito, I'm not doing this anymore. Okay. But, I'm questioning that. Why not? If, when we're looking at something with wisdom and we know, this is not smart to do, why don't we just listen to it right there and say no? Yeah? Or why, when we're seeing somebody being treated unfairly, we can see it clearly with wisdom, and then with compassion, we intercede as best as we can. Why can't compassion be a strong motivator to intercede? Because I think that when we correct things that are unfair, or when we refuse to get involved in negative actions, wisdom and compassion are much clearer thinking. Yeah. Whereas when we're angry, actually we may have more energy, and so we may come off stronger, but actually our mind is not perceiving things so clearly because anger is founded upon ignorance. Okay? So if we can see the wisdom and compassion behind an action and not get angry, then we can do what needs to be done, but without a lot of extra junk in the process of it. Okay? Okay, chapter 3. So again, Patra Rinpoche quote, "Much of our planning is like waiting to swim in a dry ravine." What a great image. That belongs on our refrigerator. We get so hung up in planning things, and it's like planning to swim in a dry ravine. That we plan for things that are never going to happen. Yeah, this is reminiscent of our discussion about anxiety yesterday. Yeah, we make all sorts of plans in anticipation of all sorts of horrible things that never happen. Or we make plans in anticipation of all sorts of fantastic things that are never going to happen, that we've just spent hours and hours dreaming about. You know, oh, I dream this, I dream that, this, that. You create these images. I mean, I remember when I was little, I had a fantasy life like this, dreaming all sorts of this is going to happen, that's going to, this and that, you know, way out. I was in outer space, you know, and really like planning to swim across a dry ravine. And anxiety's the same way. So whether we're daydreaming or we're anxious, it's the same kind of mechanism. It's a beautiful image, isn't it? Can you just see somebody standing kind of, you know, partway up a dry ravine in their swimsuit, looking for the water to jump into? That's the image I get. Like, oh, I came to go swimming. Where's the water? Okay. Many of our activities are like housekeeping in a dream. Yeah. Well, you dream that you do your spring cleaning. You dream that you clean the rugs and you do the laundry and you clean out all your shelves and you clean out all your cupboards and your drawers that have things in them that you don't even know you have because you haven't looked at them for 20 years. And in a dream you did all this house cleaning and it all got done, you know, without lifting a finger. How nice. But that's not the way it is it? Delirious with fever, one does not recognize the fever. Yeah? So when we have a fever, we have all sorts of appearances to our mind when we're delirious. But we don't recognize the appearances as simply appearances. We think they're true. We don't recognize that the fever is the source of those false appearances. So in the same way, we don't recognize that ignorance is the source of the false appearances that we have. And we think those false appearances are true. That things really exist in and of themselves, independently with their own essence, objectively out there. Okay? Patrul Rinpoche is brilliant, isn't he? If you do not have insight in, this is His Holiness, if you do not have insight into the way you yourself and all things actually are, you cannot recognize and get rid of the obstacles to liberation from cyclic existence, and even more important, the obstructions to helping others. Without insight, you cannot address any problem at its root or remove the seeds that might produce it in the future. So he's really saying how important insight into the nature of reality is. To overcome the misconception that things and people exist as self-sufficient entities, independent of consciousness, it is essential to observe your own mind to discover how this mistake is being conceived, and how other destructive emotions arise with such ignorance as their support. Given that attachment, hatred, pride, jealousy, and anger stem from exaggerating the importance of qualities such as beauty and ugliness, it is crucial to understand how persons and things actually exist without exaggeration. You know, like that story of the girl who was going to marry this economist who didn't know who John Kenneth Galbraith was. She really needed to see who he really was. Very clean, clear, without exaggeration. Yeah. The only way to attain this understanding is internal. You need to give up the false beliefs you are superimposing on the way you need to give up the false beliefs you are superimposing on the way things really are. There is no external means of removing attachment and hatred. We still wish there were a pill. We still wish that somebody could, maybe put some charge in our brain and make the chemicals and electrons do something a little bit different. Then we wouldn't think the way we think or feel the way we think. That's not going to happen. Okay, I mean, certainly chemicals and electricity and so on affect what happens in the brain, but there's no way to stop the afflictive emotions through that process. If you are pierced by a thorn, you can remove it forever with a needle. But to get rid of an internal attitude, you must clearly see the mistaken beliefs on which it is based. This calls for using reasoning to explore the true nature of phenomena and then concentrate on what has been understood. This is the path leading to liberation and omniscience. So here His Holiness is saying, we really need reasoning to generate wisdom, and we need concentration to be able to hold that wisdom steady in our mind so that we really can understand things thoroughly and completely and believe the things that we discover. Otherwise, we might discover something through reasoning, but our old habit of thinking is so strong that we just forget it. You know, it's like, you know, you're when you leave the doctor's office and he's just told you, you know, you really have to take, you know, cut your intake of things with high cholesterol and things that have high fat because it's not good for your body, you know, and your health is going to suffer. And we come out of the doctor's office and we're energized and we're going to do this. And on the way home, we drive past 31 flavors, and to reward ourselves for our new change of attitude, we stop and get an ice cream cone. Okay? So we had some wisdom in the doctor's office. We didn't have any concentration to hold that in our mind for the duration of the car ride home. You know? And so the old habit just comes back and we forget it. So we need the concentration. We need the repetition. We need to familiarize our mind again and again with what we discover through using our wisdom and our reasoning capacities. As Dharmakirti says, without losing belief in the object of an afflictive emotion, it cannot be abandoned. The abandonment of desire, hatred, and so forth, which are related to misperceiving advantages and disadvantages, is through not seeing those in objects, not through external ways. Okay? So the way, if we're going to abandon desire, hatred, and other afflictions, we're not going to do it through external means. Okay? It's true that keeping some distance from an object that we're quite attached to or we have a lot of aversion to, that can be very helpful at the beginning, because then at least we have some breathing space to meditate and to call up our wisdom and our reasoning capacity and really look at things very clearly. So sometimes we need that physical space from an object where we usually just go bonkers with a reactive emotion. We need that space from it. Okay, but we're not going to cure the source of the problem just by not having contact with the object. Okay, we have to really see it clearly through what it is and really make peace with the situation. How do we do that? Dharmakirti says, you know, we have to lose belief in the object of an afflictive emotion. We have to see that what we are perceiving as the object does not exist the way it appears. Okay? So, you know, Jerry Sadowski saw in young adolescent boys some kind of attraction and advantage. You know, I'm using a very gross example here. Yeah, and you just to illustrate also the suffering that comes because of it. Yeah, so he saw the beauty, the advantage of all that. His lust came up. Yeah, his reasoning faculty was gone. And then look what happened. You know, not only to the lives of these young people, but also to his own life. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, probably. Yeah? So this is an example. Maybe we haven't done things as bad as Sadhuski, I hope not, but we've done other things where our mind has been equally as clouded and we haven't been able to penetrate the object to see the disadvantage or to see, the object as it really is, or to see our relationship with the object as it really is. And so instead we've gotten really tangled up with external people, external objects, external situations, and behaved in ways motivated by anger or revenge or greed or whatever, And we've all made these kind of mistakes, right? Or am I just talking about myself here? But we've all done this. And so to really... it's kind of shocking sometimes to own the process, but also I personally find there's a sense of relief in being able to own it, because now I can do something about it. The more I cling on to, but I was right, my anger was really right, I needed to do that, that person was so na, I won the object and I was right. The more I cling to that, the more I waste my energy propping up a sandcastle. Yeah, it's better to let the sandcastle fall, deal with it, and then I can make something new. Okay, yeah?
Would that apply if it were like a chemical or addiction? Because
same thing.
Would be, all your friends would be users.
Right, same actual process. If you have a substance abuse problem, it's like there's goodness in this. When I take this, it makes me feel good. And I take it in a social situation with my friends around me. So I feel good, I fit in this group of people, I enjoy doing what we all do when we're loaded. Yeah. And we can't see that, it's destroying our family, it's ruining our financial situation, it's endangering, many people, because we're interdependent. If we get hurt, if we get busted, it influences so many other people. Yeah, and so people don't think, because they're so, the appearance of the object, the false appearance of the object is so strong. Not only that it inherently exists, but it's inherently desirable. It has inherent happiness in it. I've got to have it. I don't have any choice. The mind is so clouded by that we follow it. Yeah? And this is, this is why we have compassion for ourselves and compassion for other sentient beings. Because we're all under the, this force of our own ignorance. Now, the good thing is that there's a way out. That's the good thing. Yeah. If things really existed the way they appeared to us, then there would be no way to conquer the attachment and the anger, because then attachment and anger wouldn't be based on exaggerating good qualities. Then we'd really be stuck, But because things don't exist the way we appear, when we generate the wisdom, we can overcome our mental addiction to these false appearances, and we can stop the afflictive emotions that arise and stop doing the actions that, make messes in our lives. Okay, so that's, what's good about the whole situation. The thing is, that we have to see how things are in order to improve them. So at the beginning, seeing how things are sometimes can be a bit uncomfortable. It's like when you go to clean a house, you have to see the dirt before you can clean it. And sometimes looking at how completely filthy it is really alarming. Because you've been living there for quite a while and it hasn't been that dirty and it's completely okay. Until you start to clean it and then you realize, oh my goodness, you know, I haven't cleaned this cupboard out in how many years, and look what's in these drawers. You know, I forgot I even had these things. Yeah. So it's alarming sometimes at the beginning to see the stuff. But it's good because then we know we can clean it out. We can apply an antidote to it. Yeah. And so when we see these things, we approach it with compassion for ourselves and compassion for other people. So instead of like, ay, 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 this is terrible, it's like, oh, this is good, now I'm seeing it. And instead of, how could this person do this? It's like, I understand how they could do that, because I can see how my own exaggerated misconception mind works. Thank goodness I may have not done that, but, you know, I understand that whole process, and I can have compassion for this person whose mind was under the influence of afflictive emotions. Okay? So that's how we want to train our mind. This is all a process of training the mind. Okay? So we'll stop here. In the middle of a chapter, do I dare finish this section? I bet, should I finish the section? It might take me another hour. Okay.
Be in trouble for doing overtime.
Yeah, it's the clock's fault. Okay, I'll finish the section. When you see that all troublesome emotions, and indeed all problems, arise from a basic misunderstanding, you will want to get rid of such ignorance. The means to accomplish this is to reflect on reasoning that reveals the superimposition of a belief in inherent existence to be totally unfounded. And then to concentrate on the emptiness of inherent existence through meditation. So the way out is to use reasoning to see that our belief in inherent existence is unfounded. That's not the way things to exist. That's not the way things actually exist. And then to concentrate on that emptiness in our meditation. As Chandrakirti, a follower of Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, said, seeing with their minds that all afflictive emotions and defects arise from viewing oneself as inherently existent, and knowing that the self is the object of this, yogis refute their own inherent existence. Okay, so yogis know that grasping onto the self, you know, is the source of this, so they refute it. Aryadeva similarly says that realization of selflessness, here's by selflessness we don't mean like being selfless, like caring for others. We mean the absence of an inherently existent self or essence. Okay, Aryadeva similarly says that the realization of selflessness is the way to stop cyclic existence. He says, when selflessness is seen in objects, the seed of cyclic existence is destroyed. Okay. Is that? Oh, then there's more. When the roots of a tree are cut, all the branches, twigs, and leaves dry up. In the same way, all the problems of cyclic existence are undermined by removing the misunderstanding that is their cause. The supreme scholar practitioners of India, Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Chandrakirti, and Dharmakirti, understood that the truth cannot be realized without seeing that we superimpose on people and things a status of solidity and permanence that actually is not there. The emptiness of that false superimposition must be understood, and to do this, they analyzed phenomena through scripture and reasoning, through using scripture and reasoning. There we go. So we can reflect on this for the next year, maybe the next lifetime or the next eon. There's a lot in this to think about. Okay? And then next year we'll continue with it.